And the Israeli people, the Jewish people, have learned through history how serious. When somebody says something, guess what? You better believe they mean it, right? You better believe they mean it. I made it back to Austin, and yes, when I got off the plane, it was hotter than Hades. I can't believe it. I was like, I just came from the Middle East, and it was cooler in the Middle East than it was when I got off the plane in Austin. But I have so much to share with you. I mean, I was there for 12 days plus, mostly on the ground moving in Israel with IDF, with Israeli Defense Forces, Tom Homan, Victor Avila, a whole group of amazing Americans that want to make a difference here in our nation, which is why we were there. With Tom Trento, Ronnie Wexler, it was called Defend the Border and Save Lives, hosted by Tom Homan. And I and Victor went along the trip. Tom Homan was, though, like the big showcase, right? He's the big showcase. I don't want to take away from him. I'm going to do my own trip next year in Israel, and I want you all to come with me. But the reason that I think it's so important that we focus on Israel is not because, you're probably thinking, well, what does Israel have to do with the United States? So much. We have so much not only to learn from each other as allies, but watching how they defend their border and how they're on the offensive is so vitally important when you look at our nation and realize that our administration is doing absolutely nothing to shut down our southern border and has just had it wide open so that everyone can pour through. I am going to take you in this episode to the Gaza Strip, right on the border in Israel, Israel's border with the Gaza Strip, what was happening there. I'm going to take you to the Egyptian border on the Sinai, and what just recently, the tragedy that happened at the Israeli border. And despite everything, despite all of being on the offense all the time and doing everything that they believe is right, of course, you've got to, fix things here and there. We even went to a port of entry, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. One of the most important ports of entry in the region, mainly between Egypt and Israel, and how fascinating that tour was, because it really focused on very similar aspects that we have here in the United States, but we're just not taking the precautions necessary to protect our people. And still, even though the Israelis do everything, of course, there are tragedies. I'm going to fill you in on that as well. In fact, there were 4 people killed in the West Bank in Israel. It was horrible. It was right as I left, and I saw the news and the reports coming through, mainly on social media. Then later I went and I read some of the updated stories, but 4 Israeli citizens were gunned down by a terrorist when they were at a gas station. Soft targets, folks. That's what happens. Soft targets. We have soft targets all over the United States. And we know for a fact that terrorists are in our country because President Joe Biden and his administration did not care. And they have left that border wide open. And I'm going to prove it to you with facts. And I'm going to lay those facts out for you. And I'm going to tell you why Tom Homan, if you don't know, former ICE director, Immigration and Customs Enforcement director, and Victor Avila, who's now running for Congress and who survived a cartel attack and lost his partner, why we are all working together to protect our nation and protect our children. And we want you to join us. Folks, Allegiance Gold and silver allow you to protect what you have worked so hard for. And they give you back the control and privacy that you need. Believe me, you have got to diversify. It is so important in this day and age. And by the way, traveling overseas and seeing what's happening in the world, we've got China basically setting up camp in Cuba. We've got them all around us. We've got adversaries everywhere. We have a wide open border. We have a woke government, woke banks, woke supposed allies, right? Justin Trudeau in Canada. Look at what happened with him and everybody there, the truckers that protested COVID, and rightfully so. But right now, if you're a Sarah Carter listener and you go to Allegiance Gold, you will get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. My friends at Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA, your 401k with physical gold and silver, or have it delivered securely right to your front door. They'll educate you on the benefits of physical gold because they care and they want to build a long-term relationship with you. They don't want it to just be like they sold you something and then, forget you. No, they want to build a relationship with you. And by the way, they are 5 stars with a Trust Link. They're AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance, and they're A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. So you won't get better than that. You go ahead, do your own research, look at it yourself. If you don't just trust me, trust yourself and get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait. Call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA. Or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, or protectwithsara.com. I don't know how to thank Colonel Dany Tirza. He was absolutely an incredible host in Israel and really went into details about how the Israeli government is taking care of border security and working, in an area of the world. Imagine this. Imagine that you are constantly being targeted. Imagine that you have enemies that want to wipe you off the face of the earth, and they're your neighbors. They want to wipe you off the face of the earth. We've seen what's happened with Iran, right? We know what the Iranian government has said about Israel. It's very open. It's very blatant. They've even done it on social media. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And the Israeli people, the Jewish people, have learned through history how serious. When somebody says something, guess what? You better believe they mean it, right? You better believe they mean it. As a decent human being, a lot of us just say, there's no way somebody would ever do that. There's no way that someone would ever follow through with that. My God, if you still think that way, you haven't learned the lessons in history. Over 6 million Jews killed. I was at the Holocaust Museum, and I'll talk more about that in a future episode. But at a Holocaust Museum in Israel, it was just overwhelming. Overwhelming. You walk through these amazing halls. It was such an honor to be there, a memorial to all the lives lost, the 1.7 million children. Imagine that. 1.7 million babies, little children, walked into gas chambers, killed, taken from their parents, and killed in the most horrific ways imaginable. So you can imagine why the Israeli people and the Israeli government take their security so seriously. And if they don't, they should. And if they don't, they should. And we should too. And we should too. So while I was, going to the border, Gaza Strip with Colonel Dany Tirza, we went to Golan Heights with Colonel Grisha Yakobovich, Colonel Grisha Yakobovich. I'm learning to pronounce all these names, and hopefully I'm pronouncing them correctly because I have so much respect for these military officials, these retired military officials that have given so much of their lives to protect their country. Now, Colonel Dany Tirza, phenomenal border tour that he gave us, and he was with us for most of the time. And then we spent one day with Colonel Grisha Yakobovich in the Golan Heights. And if you don't understand the Golan Heights is the land of dispute, right? This is where there's Israeli settlements. They are constantly being targeted by enemies of Israel, that is Hamas, Hezbollah. And the people that live in this area of Israel are constantly vigilant, constantly. Children and adults living with PTSD, right? Because you never know when that next rocket is going to come over. You never know what can happen. So we're at the Golan Heights, and the neighborhoods are extraordinary. They're beautiful. I mean, these are neighborhoods, Israeli neighborhoods. To the Jewish people that are living there, know that they are living in a contentious, very dangerous spot. And this was an area that was seized during the 1967 war. And I want to make it clear for those of you that do not understand this, for those of you who maybe, are hearing in the news and especially the leftist media that, Israel is an apartheid nation and, the Israelis are not allowing, the Palestinians. I mean, there's a lot of conflict right there, right? That there's a lot of discussion. But let me explain to you what happened. Israel was being targeted by every Middle Eastern nation in 1967. The 6-Day War. Israelis were dying. And remember, Israel in the 1940s, that's when the British annexed Israel and set up this kind of demarcation line. It was called the Sykes-Picot line. And it demarcated Israel, from the rest of the Middle East and from Jordan and Syria and all these other. So it's a complicated part of the world. It was my favorite thing to study when I went to UCLA. I didn't graduate from UCLA. I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona. But when I was at UCLA, I was studying Middle Eastern foreign policy, and it's a very complicated part of the world. And it's all based on territory and borders and territory. And I'm going to tell you why this is important to us in a minute. But I want to explain to you just a little bit about the Golan Heights. So when Israel captured most of the area during the 6-Day War, which Israelis call a mitzvah, a miracle, because they actually thought they were not going to win that. It wasn't until the United States just supplied Israel with everything it needed to win that the U.S. actually assisted Israel in its survival because it was up against a formidable enemy. Formidable. The Golan is what we were hearing about all the time during the Trump administration too. And it was the reason why President Trump basically told Israel, we are gonna back you on your sovereignty over the Golan Heights that Israel had seized from Syria in 1967. And we're not going to give it back to you. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why the Israelis, for the most part, the government, it's non-negotiable. It's non-negotiable because even when those Arab nations had that area of Israel, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Hamas and Hezbollah do not want Israel to exist. They do not want the Jewish people there. And for people who act like, we're talking about Israel, we're not talking about the Jewish people, I don't believe that. I believe Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, all of these, folks here now that we have in our government are anti-Semites. They're anti-Semitic. They use Israel as an excuse for the Jewish people. And the reason Israel is so adamant about its security is because it knows that area, that even the Temple Mount, that Jerusalem itself is not safe, that the people are not safe. So Golda Meir, she was a prime minister of Israel, and there was a statement that she made. She was a tough woman. She was one tough cookie. I mean, even her picture of her at the Holocaust Museum, she's got like smoke, she's like smoking her cigarette. She's like old. She's tough. She's a tough lady, right? And this was the most amazing quote that I could imagine, and it's so true. It's so true to form, so true to life. She said, when peace comes, we will perhaps in a time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us. Peace will come when the Arabs love their children more than they hate us. I'm going to take it a step further. I can't go any further than Golda Meir, but I want to talk about our children and our border and what that means for us. Tom Homan and I and Victor Avila were not there, and I'm going to bring them on the show, and they're going to talk, and we're going to do an interview, and it's going to be amazing. We're not there with me and the Americans that were at Jexit Group, Jewish Exit, the gals up in Florida that were there. They were not there because we wanted a vacation, because it was a lot of work. I mean, there were no spas. We were up at like 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. every morning and out until late at night, and then having guest speakers. I mean, it was an educational tour. It was an educational a group discussion for 12 days. And we did it with United West and with Tom Trento. I want to give him all the credit, as well as Ronnie Wexler. I don't want to forget that. We were there because we were there to learn. We were there to learn, to bring it back to you. And I need you to hear this, because four people died on my way home. I mean, they lost their lives. And we have children dying every single day of fentanyl. We have, over 100,000 deaths in this country because the Chinese are using the drug cartels as proxies to bring in counterfeit narcotics into our country, and they are killing our children. My daughter, my family, we already know 3 people that have died from fentanyl. And not because they're injecting it, not because they're heroin addicts, but because the 3 people that we knew took a pill that they thought was a Percocet or a sleeping pill or an Oxycontin. They borrowed it from someone and they died. Somebody said that's like having 300 people a day in an airplane crash. It would be all over the news. But nobody's talking about that. And what about all the people coming in through our border, right? Coming in through our borders. We have terrorists coming in through our borders. Folks, terrorists. We know that over 200 terrorists have been apprehended at our border. And in fiscal year, 127 potential terrorists were apprehended by the Border Patrol. I went up to also to the border along the Sinai, and boy, it was hot. I'm telling you, it was hot. The Sinai, it's dunes, it's desert, it's also got Islamic State, right? Remember that? Remember Islamic State? A lot of you have probably forgotten about ISIS. A lot of people think, oh, ISIS, that doesn't exist anymore, does it? Al-Qaeda, do they exist? What's going on with Hezbollah and Hamas? Guess what? Hamas is actually training cartels to build bigger and better tunnels. It's crazy, I know. Call me crazy, but I think we should be looking at the national security implications of that border. The way the Israelis are protecting their border. And I asked specifically, when I was talking to Colonel Girsha Yakobovich, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correct again, Yakobovich. When I talked to him, I said, is this about the offensive, not the defensive? Absolutely. This is about being offensive. This is about setting up. And and it's not always perfect. Sometimes you think, wow, I have the best security ever. I built the best fence ever. I have eyes in the sky. I've got an iron dome that's going to shoot down those rockets. They're not going to be able to penetrate our defenses. And then lo and behold, something happens and defenses are penetrated. Just before we got there, it was not, I think maybe but a week before. It was on June 3rd. There was a gun battle in the area I was at in the Sinai. And this was along Israel's southern border with Egypt. And 3 Israeli soldiers, very young soldiers, several of them were killed. Several of them were very young. An Egyptian officer was also killed. What had happened was, according to Dany Tirza, the colonel that I was with there was somebody that was working. He was an Egyptian border guard, and he was working with ISIS, with Islamic State, and with smugglers that were moving drugs into Israel. Yes, because people still try, although Israel does not have the problem we have in the United States. It still has a problem. There's still narcotics, and border issues. And that's why we work together. And in fact, Tirza, Colonel Tirza, who I hope to bring on the show as well, has worked with our sheriffs out here in along the southern border. He has worked with our sheriffs. Frankly, I don't get it, but Department of Homeland Security, even though Colonel Tirza is considered a world renowned, he's been all over the world, by the way, dealing with borders and border security. Even though he is considered a world renowned border expert, Department of Homeland Security has never once called him to come down and do an assessment or a briefing of the U.S.-Mexico border. So the people that did call him, thank God, Texas border sheriffs, Arizona, New Mexico, the sheriffs, the good old sheriffs here along our southern border actually worked with Tirza. And Tirza said that, this smuggler was watching. This Egyptian border guard that was working with ISIS was watching and figured out where they had like a camouflage gate in part of the fence. And that camouflage gate is used to fix the fence. And this fence was just incredible. We'll have pictures up on YouTube and Rumble so you all can see them. But, it is a chain linked fence along the Sinai. And ever so many spots, and they didn't give us exact numbers for security purposes, there's Israeli guards in bunkers, right there that are doing extra added security. And by the way, the fence, you just touch that fence and the Israelis know that you're there. But this time, this person, this terrorist, this Egyptian border guard found the area that had been camouflaged because he had been watching diligently and made his way into Israel, got into one of the bunkers, executed 2 of the young Israeli soldiers, and then ended up in a firefight, killed a 3rd Israeli soldier, and then was killed. There was apparently somebody else arrested on the other side. And when I asked what would happen with that person in Egypt, I was told they'll probably get put in a jail for a little bit and then hailed as a hero. I can guarantee you if they ever release that person will probably not make it 6 blocks before they will meet their maker, because I think, Israel's not going to put up with that at all. So that's the way it should be. And that's the way it should be. I know it sounds harsh, right? But we live in a different world. We can't always see things through the eyes of like, oh, let's give them a chance. Let's do this. You live by that sword. You're going to probably end up dying by it. And that's the way life is over there. And it's extremely difficult and extremely hard. And Israel and Egypt have had 40 years of peace. Great allies, yes. But there is still extremism. There is still extremism. And by the way, those extremists view us as well as their enemy. We are their enemy too. We are their enemy too. And that is the reason why we have to protect our border. And we need to protect that border, not only for our children, but for the children that are crossing over, folks, that are being brought into our country and sold to pedophiles and the most horrible of horrible people that you can ever imagine. That is why I want you all to see Sound of Freedom. You need to see it. I saw this film. It is by my good friend, Eduardo Verástegui. He is working so hard with so many others to stop human trafficking and child trafficking. I was with him in Mexico last year. I was with him in Hungary, in Budapest. We talked about child trafficking while we were there. He has been with my great, great friend who I work very closely with, Rosie Orozco, who is also working to fight child trafficking. And it's the reason why we want the border shut. It is the reason why, not because we're anti-immigrant. I am so pro-immigrant because thank God my mother came here from Cuba. She came in the right way. She came on the Johnson Freedom flights. And I have the opportunity as a firstborn American on my mom's side of the family to live in this beautiful, great nation. But I don't want to see children suffering. And I don't know if you know this, but every year, over 2 million children are trafficked around the world. Now there's this new movie, Sound of Freedom, and it's aimed to raise the awareness of this often unseen horror, guys. Sound of Freedom from Angel Studios. I love Angel Studios. Remember, what did they do? They produced The Chosen. What a phenomenal, phenomenal series. And this movie is phenomenal. The release date of Sound of Freedom will be in theaters in the United States on July 4th, 2023. You can purchase tickets online. New theaters are added daily, so please check the website for current information, angel.com/freedom, angel.com/freedom. Again, I want to tell you that there are people in this world that are fighting for these children and that are fighting for our children. And we need you to join that fight with us. We need you to speak out against this. We need you to say it's unacceptable. We need you to call your lawmakers and tell them to shut down that border, because more than 500,000 children a year go missing in the United States alone. I want you to think about that. 500,000 children a year. More than 50% are victims between the age of 12 and 15. Globally, 27% of human trafficking victims are children. They're innocent, they have no one to fight for them, and they cannot fight against a grown adult. They are all on their own, and they need to know that they're not alone. Help spread this message worldwide. Again, Sound of Freedom by Eduardo Verástegui. Eduardo, I love you. You're my friend. I'm going to be there. I'm going to get everyone to go see your movie, Eduardo, and I'm going to bring you on the show so you can talk about it. It's coming to theaters on July 4th. So buy your tickets today to reserve a spot opening week. If more theaters are sold out, it will help raise awareness of this issue that often goes unnoticed. I want you to find a theater near you. You're going to be saving lives by visiting angel.com/freedom. By supporting Sound of Freedom, you will contribute in raising awareness and propelling a movement to saving millions of children around the world. And this is a movie, folks. It's not a documentary. This is a movie. It talks about Tim Ballard and the very first group of children that he and others rescued in Colombia. It was unbelievable. These children were being sold to these monsters, these horrible monsters that were buying all of these kids. And Tim Ballard saved their lives. There's no other word to express what this man did for these children. And you really, really need to take the moment to see this film. Get your tickets today at angel.com/freedom. That's angel.com/freedom. Folks, this is our nation. No one else is going to fight for our country the way we will fight for our country and for our children. No one else. No one else in the world. I promise you that. Israel has learned that lesson. One time there's a president like President Trump that's in office that is a great ally that will do everything he can to protect Israel. And maybe we have others in the future that will come and will do everything they can to be by their Israeli ally, by their side. And then you have, President Biden come in. And instead of holding out a hand to Israel, instead of inviting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to our nation, he is not. He is holding out the olive branch to Iran, an enemy of the United States, an enemy of our ally Israel, and frankly, an enemy of the Western world and our civilization. No way on God's green earth should Iran ever have access to nuclear warheads or nuclear weapons. And they will not. And they will not. Not as long as Israel exists and Israel is on the offensive. And that is why Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. We should heed their lessons, guys. Our children should not be dying in the streets of fentanyl poisoning. Our country should not be abused by our own broken system and broken bureaucracy, by people who are lining their own pockets and caring more about themselves than you. People who are using Washington, D.C. as their own special private bank account when they should be working for you, the American people. Washington, D.C. should learn a very, very big lesson come 2024 and even before 2024. You need to fight for your children. We need to fight for each other. And we need to make sure that Washington hears us loud and clear. This is our country. We're going to defend it. And guys, frankly, if you're not doing your job, you are going to be fired. And in fact, half of you are fired in my mind. Guys, follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. You can see all those amazing, I'm going to post as much as I can, videos and pictures from Israel. I'm going to give you as much as I can on all of my social media. Look, God bless you. God bless all of our children. God bless our beautiful nation. God bless the great state of Israel. And you know what? God bless the great state of Texas. I'm so happy to be home. Thank you, and I'll talk to y'all soon.